Welcome to Manga Historian's Complete Story Series. Today we're going to be covering Berserk Volume 3. And in our last chapter, Guts has made his way to the Count, but the Count has proven to be a bigger problem than Guts thought. Now Guts lays lifeless at the feet of the Count as he towers over him. And the Count looks down at Guts and he tells him, "It's over now." Puck flies in telling Guts, "You need to get up! You were acting so high and mighty before, it's time to wake up!" The Count continues to stare at him. "How these humans are so fragile." And then Puck begins to yell at the Count, stating, "You were one of those fragile humans. I know all about you from Teresa." "It wasn't about revenge. If that was the case, I would just exercise my authority. Instead, I just threw away my humanity." The Count begins to laugh. "I thought elves had the intellect of a bird or a squirrel, but your speech is amusing. I will spare your life, so be gone." Puck begins to pick through Guts' pockets and he pulls out the behelit, and then he tries to leave, but the Count sees what he is taking. Puck quickly grabs it and he begins to fly off, stating, "You won't catch me, I have the advantage of flight." And then the Count begins to shake the walls and the stones begin to fall, hitting Puck. Before the Count can even take the egg, Teresa runs into the room calling for Puck and then stops and sees her father. Teresa turns in horror at what her father has become and she runs to hide. Then the Count looks back at Puck, furious for causing her to see him like this. The Count begins to come crashing down on Puck and Puck is frozen in place, petrified with fear. Just before the Count falls, 3 daggers fly through the air, hitting the Count in the face, and he looks over to where he left Guts, and he sees him, hardly able to stand, ready to attack. Puck flies over, calling him a jerk for faking dying, and Guts just brushes him away. Guts begins to drag himself to the Count, and Puck tries to stop him, and he sees Guts smiling. Guts looks up and he says, "That wasn't good enough. Just 2 or 3 broken bones. If you want to stop me, you're gonna have to crush my skull or pierce my heart, just like you." The Count yells in rage and kicks Guts away, bouncing him across the floor until his body hits another pillar. He then begins to charge, but just as he gets close, Guts grabs Teresa and he holds her up as a shield. The attack stops mid-attack, and then Guts fires his arm cannon directly into the Count's face. He starts to get back up and he walks over to his sword, but with his hands broken, he leans down and he bites down on the hilt of the sword and he lifts it up, balancing it off of his metal arm. He then begins to pick up speed and he runs towards the Count and he slices through one of the Count's mouths, cutting off the head. The Count's large body begins to fall and Guts gets back up smiling and he starts to walk towards the severed head. The Count begins to curse him, so Guts takes out his knife and he sticks it in the Count's mouth, pulling it upwards towards his eye. Guts tells him, "I will show you the limit of a human," and then he pulls the blade up, cutting right next to his eye. The Count screams out in pain and Teresa watches, crying, saying no, and Puck flies over telling him, "Stop, not in front of Teresa." And then Guts takes the knife and he swings it towards Puck, telling him to shut up. "If you get in my way, I'll kill you." He begs for him to stop, and then Guts slams the head on the ground, telling him, "Take a good look at a body that doesn't die." And then he stabs the head with the knife over and over, and Guts begins to laugh. "This is amazing. You really are superhuman. You really don't want to die, do you?" He continues to stab the blade until it breaks, and then he slips and falls on his back. As he lay here, he continues to laugh, picking himself back up. However, all of the blood from the Count begins to flow over to the behelit. He begins to beg that he doesn't want to die, and then everyone looks to see the behelit open its mouth, and then the room begins to change. Stairs appear going in all directions, and the Count tells Guts, "They are coming! The Great Ones are coming!" Soon Guts' wound begins to take its toll and his body collapses, but that's when he hears footsteps. When he looks up, he sees people standing there, floating in front of him. He begins to grit his teeth, seeing him. He sees Griffith! He calls out to him, and Griffith tells him, "It looks like you're still squirming around in your pitiful existence." One of the figures looks down at the Count and tells him, "You've been ordained by the laws of fate. Your desperate desire for life has cleaved open space and brought us here." The Count begs for them to grant his wish, take his life and avenge him, but the figures tell him, "We can't. It is your desire that has brought us here, not your hatred for that man." The Count tells him that it's because of the Black Swordsman. He destroyed so many of the apostles of Godhead. He's your enemy. The figures begin to laugh, and Griffith tells him, "A few worthless servants killed is inconsequential to us. That man is petty and his existence is beneath our notice." Guts begins to pick himself back up with all of the rage that he can find, and the other Godhead members say all that hatred seems to be aimed at Femto in particular, who is after all responsible for marking him with that brand. Guts begins to make his way up the stairs towards Griffith, telling him, It's thanks to you that I'm like this, standing there like you're some godly being. Guts tries to take a swing, but the brand begins to bleed, and then Guts begins to lose his strength, and Griffith tells him, don't you know that your brand responds to demon kind and causes pain? The closer you get to a greater demon, the more pain. That's as far as you go. And Guts' body begins to fall to the ground, and then he gets up on his foot, and using the last of his strength, he brings his sword down towards Griffith. Before the sword can land, Griffith pushes him away with such force that Guts' body hits the wall, breaking it, and he falls down onto his own face. Griffith looks down at the Count and tells him, it seems you have unintentionally granted his wish. But the Void says enough of this. It is time to perform the invocation of doom. What is your sacrifice? And the Count tells him, the Black Swordsman. The female slain tells him, that's not good enough. And another member, Conrad, says he's already been branded. The Count then asks, who? And Griffith points to his daughter, to Teresa. The Count says, is there anyone else? If there was anyone else, I would. But my daughter? Another member says, don't be upset. Just do what you did last time. And Teresa asks, last time? Ubik starts to laugh, asking if the little girl doesn't even know what her father has done. Well, then show her. 7 years ago, the Count was a noble man and he had a beautiful wife and a daughter, the very picture of happiness. But the land was overrun by pagans. So often, the Count was away destroying these heretics. One day after returning home, he opened his doors and found a sea of flesh squirming in a tangled mess, and above them was a statue of a grotesque god with the head of a goat. The one who was clinging to that statue was the one that he loved above all. And in blind rage, the Count killed every single person except for his own wife. And when he raised his sword to her, he couldn't do it. The Count decided that he wouldn't do it. He would end his own life instead. However, his despair called out and opened the portal to another dimension. He begged for the suffering to end. He'll do anything. So he was offered to become a supernatural being if he would sacrifice someone. The sacrifice was offered to the one person that he loved and hated the most, so he could transcend his very humanity. The Void begins to bring the mark closer to Teresa, telling the Count that all he has to do is offer her and they will grant his wish. As Puck watches, Guts begins to call to him, telling him, I need my right arm so I can use it. Hurry up and do it now. Puck looks back and Guts tells him, hurry up or your friend will get the same brand as me. So if you don't want that, heal my arm right now. The God Hand states that the Count needs to hurry or soon his life will snuff out. He already belongs to them after he dies. And don't think he'll be resting in peace. Griffith calls out to the Count, behold! A vortex begins to swirl in it. The demons of the damned and Griffith tell him that this is only a small portion, but this is hell. If you keep waiting, soon your soul will be pulled in and you will wander for all of eternity. Selene says this is the fate of those who get caught up with demon kind. And then Puck sees that would mean Guts! Griffith tells him again, you have two options, be reborn living among demons and continue your existence among demon kind, or revert to nothingness. And Conrad tells him, all you have to do is say the phrase, I offer my daughter for sacrifice. The brand gets closer and closer to Teresa, and she tries to back away, but as she does, she inches closer and closer to the ledge. The Void tells him, speak it! And the Count begins to think, is this the end for him? Only to die as some carved up monster? No, he doesn't want to die! The light begins to shine, and the Void says the fate has been severed. From the vortex, souls begin to flow out, reaching to take their newest soul. The Count watches, and the souls grab a hold of his severed head, and they begin to pull. But among those souls, Puck sees someone. He sees Vargas. The Count begins calling out to Teresa, but the souls begin to fade back into the vortex, taking the Count with them. But the souls are not done claiming. They begin to grab onto Guts' leg to pull him along with them. Griffith turns, and he begins to walk away, and Guts begins to load his cannon, and he calls out to Griffith, and then he fires his cannon right at him, and as the shot gets closer, it's deflected by an invisible shield. The blast knocks Guts back down to the ground, and all of the God Hand members just stare at him, and then a light begins to shine. As the light fades, everyone is dropped back into the moral world. Puck looks around, but then he sees Teresa crying, and in front of her is the severed body of the Count. Puck flies over to Teresa, and she tells him to go away! This is all just a lie! I just want to go back to my room! If I stay here, I would rather be dead. Guts stands over her and he drops a knife and he tells her, go ahead then, kill yourself. Puck slaps Guts, telling him, how could you be so heartless? And Guts responds with, all right then, why not just die then if it's so bad? It's easy, you just need to slit your wrist and all of your worries will be over. You'll probably end up in heaven. Or would you prefer hell? That's where you would see your mother and father again. But it's your life. Do with it what you want. Teresa grabs the knife and she begins to hold it to her wrist. But Puck wraps himself around it, telling her, what do you think you're doing? Snap out of it. The ledge that Teresa was sitting on begins to crack, and then the floor begins to give and she begins to fall. But before falling, Guts holds out his sword and Teresa grabs a hold. Blood begins to drip from her fingers and she begins to scream, and Guts lifts his sword, tossing her back to solid ground. Puck rushes over to check on her, and Guts starts to look at Teresa. Teresa tells him, "It all started after you came. This is all because of you." Guts gets back up and tells her, "You don't plan on dying anytime soon, so that's fine by me." He then grabs his cloak and the behelit, and he walks away. Teresa tells him, "I will kill you! Someday I will kill you!" And Guts turns back. "That's fine. I'll be ready whenever you do it." Puck flies to catch up and notices Guts is crying. He knocks him away and continues to drag himself away from the scene. Where a long time ago, there was a mercenary group going through a village that had been killed off and hung. As the group moved through, a woman jumps from the carriage and runs over to one of the hanging bodies on a tree and picks up a small child's body. One of the men mentions that Shisu has been acting strange ever since her miscarriage 3 days ago. And then they state that the leader Gambino, that would have been his kid, right? But he says, "How the hell should I know?" Gambino grabs Shisu and pulls her away, telling her that the kid is already dead. But as the child falls back down, it begins to cry. She runs back, picking the child up and holding it close, and then runs back to the carriage. One of the mercenaries comments that isn't it a bad omen to be picking up a child in a place like this? And Gambino says, "What? Are you scared?" 3 years later, nurses gather around Shisu in a tent, telling Guts to get out. Shisu has the plank. But as Shisu reaches out to him, Guts doesn't leave. He stays there holding the woman that he saw as his mother until she passes. 3 more years later, Guts finds himself on the battlefield with Gambino and his men holding out weapons to the men. Gambino calls out for them to give him a spear, and hesitant, Guts gives it to him. Gambino kills the man charging at him, but as the dead body falls on Guts, Gambino hits him with the base of the spear, telling him, "Don't be so slow. I could have been killed." Days later, Guts trains with Gambino with swords, but being so small and using a sword so big, his movements are slow, and Gambino knees him in the stomach. "You can't expect to be getting any more free meals. You have to earn your food." One of the other men then tells him it's fine. Why doesn't Guts use a sword more to his size? But Guts tells him no. He picks himself back up, grabbing the enormous sword, and he charges back at Gambino. But Gambino begins to slice away, cutting Guts all over. That is, until Guts moves forward, thrusting his sword up, cutting Gambino's face. Gambino's face fills with rage, and then he grabs Guts, hitting him across the face, cutting his nose. The other men then rush over to check on Guts and tell Gambino, "That was a bit childish, wasn't it?" And Gambino tells them, "Yeah, I guess so." As the night comes, Guts tries to get some sleep, but the cut on his nose clogs his nose with blood and making it hard for him to fall asleep. And then he overhears some of the other mercenaries outside stating that he's a bad omen. Probably his fault why Shisu died. Guts does the only thing that he knows to do. He grabs his sword and he holds it close as he tries to go back to sleep. Days pass and Guts continues to practice swinging his sword until he finally reaches 100 swings. And then he takes a break. The blisters on his hands start to hurt and begin to bleed, but he can do it. He can push through it. Behind him, Gambino calls him, stating he's taking an awful long time to get some water. And then he tosses a punch at Guts, telling him it's medicine. Gambino heads back before leaving Guts, telling him thank you. But Gambino just says, "Hurry up and get the food." 3 more years pass and Guts finds himself on the battlefield again, this time holding a sword, and Gambino orders the charge and the men start running into the battlefield with Guts joining them. A knight swings his sword at Guts, knocking off his helmet, but Guts thrusts his sword forward, stabbing the knight in the throat. He then pushes the knight off of him, and as he stands back up, he's hit in the back with a flail. The large knight continues to attack again, but before he does, Gambino stabs the knight from behind through the neck. He then looks down, telling him, "Your sword isn't practical." After he kills another one, he tells him, "Move on, we got more work to do." Later that night, the mercenaries continue to collect their rewards, but after collecting his, Guts runs over to Gambino to give him his share. Gambino pulls out a coin and flicks it, telling him, "Keep it up." A short while later, the night goes on and another mercenary calls out to Gambino, and when he turns, Gambino says, "Donovan, what can I do for you?" As the moon hangs over in the sky, Guts lays in his tent trying to sleep, and then he hears something and he sees Donovan. Donovan reaches down to him, but Guts reaches for his sword and Donovan tackles him and holds him down. And that concludes Berserk Volume 3. Story gets even crazier from here, trust me. So don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you want to keep up to date with the Berserk mangas as we bring them out. And don't forget to pick this one up yourself if you want to get way ahead of us. And follow us on Twitter at MangaStorian if you're interested. I'll see you guys next time right here.